It is November 1978, and Britain is sliding headfirst into another damp and restless winter. In football, European Cup holders Liverpool are still licking their wounds from an early exit, and on the radio, Kate Bush is haunting the airwaves with hammer horror. It's a country running on tea, determination, and the faint smell of damp wool. In the wider world, on the 7th of November 1978, California voters reject the Briggs Initiative, a proposal to ban gay teachers, marking a turning point in America's civil rights movement. Just over a week later, on the 18th of November 1978, the world is stunned by the tragedy in Jonestown, Guyana, where over 900 people lose their lives in a mass murder-suicide. A dark reminder of how easily hope can turn to horror. Across the Atlantic, ambition takes many forms. Some fight for equality, others chase fortune. And every engine of change is running hot. In the western side of Europe, cars are becoming sharper, more precise, more civilized. Across the Iron Curtain, they remain simple, strong, and built with an honesty that never goes out of style. Europe, once divided by ideology, now shows its differences in metal and noise. Some say these were the cars that captured two opposing worlds. Machines built for very different drivers, but united by the same stubborn will to endure. All we know is they're the BMW 526, the Renault 20TS, the Skoda 130 RS, and the Lada 1600. This is Four Wheels and Fuel, Season 2, Episode 10. BMW 520. The BMW 5 Series arrived in 1972 as the spiritual successor to the beloved Neue Klasse saloons, bringing a new level of sophistication to the executive saloon segment. The design came from Paul Bracq, clean, precise, and unmistakably Bavarian. By 1978, the BMW 5 Series had quietly become the executive car your dad would point out with quiet admiration. The one your uncle might have promised himself when business finally picked up. It was the car that made middle management feel a little more European. The 520 badge sat modestly on the boot lid, yet it carried an air of confidence that most saloons could only dream of. The shark nose front, slim pillars and tidy proportions gave it a kind of restrained elegance that spoke of success without swagger. On British roads full of boxy Austins and Cortinas, the 520 looked like the future had arrived early. Inside, everything was where it should be. The seats looked firm enough to mean business, supportive, upright, and built for distance. Ahead, the dials were clear and purposeful, their needles moving with the calm precision of a Swiss watch. And a driving position that made even the morning commute feel like an appointment worth keeping. The switchgear clicked with satisfying precision, the vents turned smoothly into place, and every surface seemed arranged with deliberate purpose. Pop the bonnet and you'd find the 2-litre N20 six-cylinder engine, the same one that replaced the old 4-cylinder. Smooth, quiet, and just spirited enough. It delivered around 122 brake horsepower through the rear wheels, with typical BMW precision. Out on the open road, the 520 was calm, deliberate, and balanced. It cornered neatly, soaked up bumps with quiet composure, and never lost its sense of purpose. Even at modest speeds, there was a feeling of control that made every trip, whether to the office or a family lunch at the seaside, feel quietly special. It wasn't just an executive saloon. It was a statement of progress. Parking one outside a modest suburban home said more about taste than wealth. The kind of car that made your mum proud when the neighbours glanced over the hedge, and your granddad nod approvingly at the sound of that six-cylinder hum. What BMW managed with the 520 was subtle but significant. It made the act of driving feel intelligent again. Every detail, from the weight of the gear lever to the clarity of the instruments, felt considered. The E12 reminded families that good engineering could be just as impressive as luxury. And for many, it became the quiet dream car of the late 1970s. A machine that turned routine miles into moments of meaning.
If you think this looks like the Renault 30 launched at last year's show, you're right. The 20 basically has the same shell. 2 rectangular headlights instead of 4. The only other feature that may not suit some drivers is the rather heavy steering. Unlike the bigger engine 30, no power steering for the 20 yet. For Renault, it sells between their 16 and 30. For its competitors, the most worried will be Citroën and their CX-2000. Lancia with their 2-litre Beta saloon, and Leyland Cars with the today rather ageing Rover and Triumph 2000 models.
Renault 20 TS. When Renault unveiled the 20 in late 1975, it was meant to bridge a gap. A car for people who wanted the comfort of the Renault 30, but not its price or V6 thirst. Built on the same platform, yet powered by simpler 4-cylinder engines, it offered a new kind of French modernity, smooth, quiet, and refreshingly rational.
Renault 20 TS, de 2 liter met inhoud.
By 1978, the Renault 20 had become the sort of car your mum admired in the supermarket car park. Practical, smart, and just a little more continental than the rest. The new 20 TS sat near the top of the range. For families used to rattly saloons and sticky choke cables, the 20 felt like stepping into modernity. The shape was unmistakably French, a long, smooth hatchback with lines drawn for comfort rather than attention. It looked at home on a motorway slip road or outside a neat suburban bungalow. Where German cars bragged about precision, the Renault 20 simply carried on with its own kind of charm. Pop the bonnet and you'd find Renault's 1.6-litre Type 843 4-cylinder. With around 90 brake horsepower, it wasn't quick, but it was wonderfully composed. The kind of engine that started first time and hummed all the way to the coast. Inside, everything was soft and inviting. Wide velour seats, a thin-rimmed steering wheel, and a dashboard determined to prove logic could be stylish. The switchgear clicked with that delicate Renault precision, and the ventilation system was the envy of every Cortina owner. You could tell French engineers had actually sat inside their own cars. On the road, the 20 felt relaxed and capable. It glided over potholes with a shrug and leaned gently through corners, as if reminding you there were more important things than speed. It was a car built for conversation rather than competition, a gentle companion on the school run or the drive to the seaside. The Renault 20 wasn't about showing off, it was about getting things right. The hatchback layout offered a kind of flexibility that felt almost futuristic in 1978. Practical, dependable, and quietly proud of being both. The French answer to a very British question. How to make everyday life feel a little more civilized.
Skoda 130 Rally Sport. Soutěžní automobil dnes už dobře známý nejenom v Československu, ale i v zahraničí. Od první chvíle, kdy se tyto vozy v symbolických červeno-modro-bílých barvách objevily na startech velkých mezinárodních soutěží, neměli motorističtí odborníci ani chvíli pochybnosti o tom, že z automobilových závodů v Mladé Boleslavi vyjeli do světa vozy aspirující na první místa ve své třídě.
Skoda 130 RS. Now we head east, past the tidy forecourts of the West, into a world where cars weren't about prestige, but perseverance. In Czechoslovakia, the Skoda 130 RS was proof that ingenuity could thrive even behind closed borders. To the neighbours, it was exotic. To enthusiasts, it was a small miracle, a car that made the Iron Curtain feel a little thinner. The 130 RS had started life as a humble 110R coupe before Skoda's engineers stripped, strengthened and reshaped it for rallying. What they built became legendary, light, agile and stubbornly quick. In 1977, it took class victories at Monte Carlo, and by 1978, it had become a rolling ambassador for Czech engineering, a car that gave families something to cheer for on Sunday broadcasts that faded in and out on the radio. Somewhere, Dad would nudge Grandad and say, "That's our lot, beating the big boys." Open the bonnet, and you wouldn't find a great big V6 or any fancy badging. Just a 1.3-litre four-cylinder tucked neatly at the back. All 110 brake horsepower, or 140 brake horsepower of it, working harder than most engines twice its size. Uncle Pyotr might have called it a sewing machine with spirit. The twin carburetors made it sing. The gearbox clicked through short, precise throws, and the rear-mounted layout gave it the balance of something far more exotic. From the outside, it looked wild. Squat stance, wide arches, and impressive wheels that seemed to carry half the Eastern Bloc on their shoulders. But inside, it was all business. Bucket seats, simple instruments, and barely a hint of luxury. The smell of petrol and hard work filled the cabin, and yet that was the charm. It wasn't built for comfort. It was built to prove a point. On the road, or better yet, a twisting gravel stage, the 130 RS was alive. The steering was direct, the suspension taut, and the little engine buzzed like it had something to prove. It didn't just grip the road, it grinned at it. Every flick of the wheel reminded you that brilliance doesn't always need big budgets or big engines. Just clever people with stubborn pride. For plenty of families, it was more than a car on the television. Somewhere in the family tree, there was always a cousin or an uncle who'd rallied one, or at least claimed he had. And for everyone else, watching from behind snow-dusted fences or smoky living rooms, the 130 was pride on wheels. Proof that spirit and skill could outdrive circumstance. Lada 1600. If the Skoda 130 RS showed the East could race, the Lada 1600 proved it could endure. It was the everyday hero, the car that carried families, groceries, and entire generations through winters that would make most Western cars shiver. Known officially as the VAZ 2106, it was Lada's proudest creation, the company's flagship, built to outlast everything from bad roads to bad politics. At home, though, people didn't call it by numbers. They called it Sześciorka, the sixth one, said with the kind of affection normally reserved for a family pet. In 1978, it stood for the same thing across Moscow, Warsaw, and even Milton Keynes: dependability. Your dad might have had one, or maybe your aunt swore by hers for the weekly market run. Either way, it was a familiar shape, square, honest, and built to take punishment. Pop the bonnet, and there sat the 1.6-litre four-cylinder, a simple, unpretentious engine that never asked for much and gave more than expected. About 78 brake horsepower of steady progress, fed through a 4-speed manual. Grandmother would have said it sounded busy, and she'd have been right. The Lada never hurried, but it never quit. The interior was plain but dependable. Heavy switches, half-vinyl seats that outlived the furniture at home, and a heater that could roast your ankles in seconds. Mum would have kept a blanket on the back seat just in case, while Dad muttered about spark plugs and petrol coupons. And yet, on a cold morning when it fired on the first turn, the whole family trusted it a little more. Out on the road, the 1600 was steady and sure-footed. The steering was heavy at low speeds, but direct. The suspension soft enough to glide over potholes that would swallow a Renault whole. It didn't corner with grace, but it travelled with purpose. Across cobbles, gravel, and half the continent, if asked. In a world obsessed with prestige, the Lada made reliability look heroic. It wasn't about style or status. It was about getting everyone where they needed to be, every single day. Grandad might have laughed at its looks, but he'd have admitted, quietly, that it always came home. Looking back, the Lada 1600, the VAZ 2106, the Sześciorka, was more than a car. It was a companion, a workhorse, a stubborn friend that refused to give up. For millions across Europe, it was the sound of normal life. And in its own modest way, that made it just as important as any sports car. November 1978 was a month of contrasts. Two halves of a continent staring at each other through fogged windscreens. In the West, the BMW 520 and Renault 20 defined confidence through calm precision. In the East, the Skoda 130 RS and Lada 1600 proved that strength could still have a heartbeat. Did your family ever have one like it? Or perhaps waved as a neighbour's did its morning cough of exhaust? Tell us your memories below and keep those stories on the road. Next time, the story takes a turn for the extraordinary. As 1978 draws to a close, Europe celebrates its icons and says goodbye to a few old friends. We'll see you there.